It's marvelous to be at GALF year after year, not only because it brings together people who have their creative expressions, but also because it is a platform and a crucible for liberal thought, for public reason. And this is why we cherish this festival so much. And thank you all for being here this evening. It's been a long day, and I have the permission of my indulgent friends here to begin with an invocation, which is not an invocation to a deity, it's an invocation to a predicament. And I think that even as we gather here to celebrate the voice, the ability to have poetic utterance, I think we should remember, as we've had occasion to recall in many sessions in the last few days, the fact that several millions of our compatriots are living today in an enforced silence. For 4 months and a few days, our compatriots have been living in a situation of lockdown, without communication, a situation that has produced anguish and suffering and violence on an unprecedented scale. So there's very little, it pains me to say that there is so little that we can do about this, although there is much we can. But as a poet, what I'd like to do is to read 2 verses from a magnificent poem that was written in 1950 by the great Kashmiri modernist, Dinanath Kaul Nadim. The political situation was somewhat different, but the words resonate today even more perhaps than they did in 1950. I'm just reading 2 brief verses. It's a long poem, it's an anthem. And it's called Bugyavna Az. I will not sing today. Bugyavna Az, Tikyazi Az Chijangbaz, Tikyazi Az Chijal Saz, Hol Gandit Kashiri Myani Zagayat. Bugyavna Az. Bugyavna Az Nashat Shalamar Abshar Lalazar Kui Naram Naram Fisul Fisul Dasab Subs Shabnamok Sunagma Khan. Bugyavna Az. Bugyavna Az. I will not sing today because warlords and conspirators have set their sights on my Kashmir today. I will not sing of the gardens of Nishat and Shalimar, of waterfalls, of the red heart of the poppy, of soft things, of smooth things. I will not sing of that which is green, of that which is dappled with dew. Such sweet songs I will not sing today. And yet we must sing, and we must bear witness. And in that spirit of bearing witness, which I think is one of the most important things poetry can ever do, I'm going to invite Arundhathi Subramaniam to go on, and then Mustansir Dalvi, and then I'll follow with a few readings. And we'll do 2 rounds.
So since I wasn't intending to go first, and at the same time it seems churlish to refuse, and it's also significant that we've started on this particular note, so I want to pause before I begin, because each voice is an invitation to a different tone and a different timbre. And I'm glad we started on the note that we did, but it does merit a pause. I grew up in the city of Bombay, and I often say that one of the significant presences in my life growing up was Eunice D'Souza, poet and professor. And here's a particular poem by her that has always stayed with me, and I use a line from it as an epigraph. I don't know how many of you have enjoyed the work of a particular poet and then made the mistake of meeting her or him. It can often be an anticlimax from which one never recovers. So this particular line from her poem is best to meet in poems. For me, this is also a reflection on what it meant growing up in Bombay with a sense of a living tradition of Indian poetry in English, to which I was heir. But it also meant reflections on what kind of legacy one might want to leave behind. I grew up in an age of poets. I grew up in an age of poets who told me that joy was for cabbages, until I found that beneath their smoking empires of sulfur, there lay a shiver of doubt, that they wondered, as I did, about what it might mean to be leafy, to wilt, to be damaged sometimes by upstart caterpillars, and still stay green, chaotically, wetly, powerfully, green. Now, I meet poets who exchange visiting cards, are best friends with the dentist, all dankness deodorized, their poems cool seashells, their laughter splintered eggshells. Poets who never seem to wonder about cabbages at all. Still best to meet in poems. The second poem that I'd like to read is actually based in Goa, so it feels appropriate to be reading it here. It's a poem about friendship and it's a poem about loss. But someone who, perhaps it was Abhay, we were talking about this just yesterday, and this mic is not cooperating. Or am I not holding it up right? I'm not good at that. No, it's about a hit. We were thinking yesterday, talking about loss and whether the poetry of loss is necessarily a poetry of gloom. And for me, not so in this particular book at any rate. And all I'd like to say is this is about a particular kind of friendship that I think we all know or have known at some point or the other. For me, it is an image of a college cafeteria, a blazing argument, and a moment that's bathed in a kind of immaculate light, sunlight. That's the moment that comes to mind when I read this poem. Deleting the picture for AA 1967 to 2015. It's 2005, and we're almost glamorous, the five of us. The chairs are cane, my shirt batik, the sunshine Goa, and Heineken. We're past the clumsy brutality of 18. We've deleted makeshift faces, borrowed persuasions, stances without journeys. We've forgiven the treacheries of student seminars, wrong addresses at different ends of the city, digressions of faith. No edge to our voices anymore when we say Zen or Gramsci. We're wearing the dumb happy of holiday and wearing it well. And there's always so much sun. Against lime-washed churches and casual plantations of melted green, we are laughing hard. Beer-glazed, sand-drizzled, stoned. No. I'll just go with this. Not at all. No. Oh gosh, I don't like this. Is this better? Okay. We're wearing the dumb happy of holiday and wearing it well. And there's always so much sun. Against lime-washed churches and cashew plantations of melted green, we are laughing hard. Beer-glazed, sand-drizzled, stoned on Sergeant Pepper and Kishore Kumar. And there's the other picture, look, where arms entwined we are bathed in fierce siesta light, and we seem to know that this moment is teetering on the verge of never again. It isn't difficult, of course, to skip the nostalgia, to fast forward the embarrassment of memory, to speak as others do, of calcium rather than satori. So the morning I heard it wasn't difficult to turn efficient, to delete pictures of hummingbirds and cardamom tea and the air ticket you emailed me never knowing it would be the one to your funeral. It gets easier, friend, with age, to delete, to plan breakfast, to turn the page. It would have been easier still if you hadn't deleted the sun. I don't know how many of you have felt this way about parents, but I remember for many years in my life just seeing parents as landscape, geography, never quite thinking of them as individuals. And then there comes a time suddenly when a parent blazes into personhood, when landscape becomes woman. I was 8 when I looked through a keyhole and saw my mother in the drawing room in her hibiscus silk sari, her fingers slender around a glass of iced cola. And I grew suddenly shy for not having seen her before. I knew her well, of course. Serene undulation of blue malmal, wrist serrated by thin gold bangle, gentle convexity of mole on upper right arm, and her high arched feet, better than I knew myself. And I knew her voice like running water, ice cubes in cola. But through the keyhole at the grown-up party, she was no longer geography. She seemed to know just when to incline her neck, just when to sip her swirly drink, and she understood the language of lacquered nails and baritone voices and words like emergency. I could have watched her all night. And that's how I discovered that keyholes always reveal more than doorways, that a chink in the wall is all you need to tumble into a parallel universe, that mothers are women. And I'm going to conclude this round with a poem called Mitti. I choose this particular poem because it was a commissioned poem, and it's not often that poets are commissioned to write, so when one is always delighted. And this was a newspaper that asked some of us to write a poem incorporating an Indian word in a language other than English, an Indian language other than English. And I loved the idea until I saw the word. And the word that was assigned to me by one of the readers was mitti, which in Hindi means mud. And I thought I was actually being asked to write some kind of jingoistic motherland poem, which I didn't want to do. And so I was on the verge of saying no, but then I decided to just stay with the word and see where it led me. And it led me to a particular kind of alluvial place inside myself, and I'm glad I stayed with it. Mitti. As a child, I ate mud. It tasted of grit and peat and wild churning and something else that I could never quite find a name for. Later, I became a moon gazer, always squinting through windows, believing freedom was aerial, until I figured that the moon was a likely mud gazer, longing for the thick sludge of gravity, the promiscuous thrill of touch, the license to break, make, remake. And so I uncovered the old role of poets, to be messengers between moon and mud. And I began to uncover the many languages of earth that have nothing to do with nations and atlases, and everything to do with the ways of earwigs, the pilgrim trail of roots, the great longing of life to hold and be held, and the irrepressible human love of naming. Ooze, mire, manure, humus, dirt, silt, mold, loam, soil, slush, clay, shit, mann, matope, baro, tiden, ni, luto, fango, all have their place, I found, in the democracy of tongues, none superior, none untranslatable, all reminders of the anthem of muck, of which we are made. Except when June clouds capsize over an Arabian sea, and a sleeping city awakens to an ache so singular that for just a moment it could have no name. Other than that, where sound meets scent, and a slop of matter meets a slick lunatic wetness, mitti. Just that. Nothing else will do.
It's lovely to be here and be part of this once annual reading session that Vivek has so kindly curated for us over the years. Ranjit began by an invocation that I think I should extend for a people who have been suppressed for so long, by reading a short quatrain from Faiz Ahmad Faiz. मता है लौह कलम छिन गई तो क्या गम है कि खून दिल में डुबोली है उंगलियां मैंने, जुबां पे मोहर लगी है तो क्या है कि रख दी है हर एक हल्का जंजीर में जुबां मैंने. I would not have a care if they took away my pen and paper, for I have dipped my fingers in the bloody inkwell of my heart. I would not have a care if they sealed my lips shut, for I have secreted my voice in every link of every manacle. The first poem that I would like to read is called Narcissus Empties His Pool. And this was a poem written on the very day that a state in our country suddenly became an unstate. And this poem is essentially wondering what kind of mindset would lead to someone to do something like this. So it is not addressed to the people of the state, but the perpetrator of this sort of thing. Narcissus empties his pool. Self-love, self-image, and self-disgust. Triplets born of unnatural union with a land that has since weaned him. He longs for her fairy tale teats that lulled him comatose, nursing him in the comforting half-light of mother myths, purity, and presence. He has smashed mirrors, pulled plugs, drunk the glass dry, muted every echo of the voice reverberating inside him. Now all he can tolerate of himself is his image jackboot stamped on the face of the other. Another pool cleaved. He discards the stick used to poke a hole in its basin, fulfillment in a love only his hands can mold. The next poem is a poem about Bombay, which is my city, and it's also a poem that alludes to a changing climate that we are all afflicted with. Sometimes you don't really consciously try to write a poem about that, but maybe, these things get embedded and emerge in any case. This is a poem called Summer Falls on Bombay Like Icarus. And I wrote it after we had an extensively long summer that just didn't seem to go away. Of course, not knowing that it would follow a long monsoon that didn't seem to go away, and it has just been raining in Bombay. Summer falls on Bombay like Icarus, divested of his invention, accelerating at 9.8 meters per second per second. Winter has been deceptive this year, overstaying, stooping to seduce like a government elected on false promises. Shade is real estate, a premium fought for with planted pennants, no quarter offered, Iwo Jima under Frere arcades. Bhishtis at Horniman Circle revel in the comeuppance of a statewide drought, aggravated by the ban on plastic. On World Heritage facades, shy sunbursts efface themselves. Fountains once frozen evaporate off metal grills. Irises are camera shutters, whirring to pinholes, scarred by the glare of golden peltophorum that spontaneously shed, weeping for the boy, shrouding feathers and entrails. Tar congeals, waxen, mortified. Between the scatter soaks a letter to mother, unsent. This next poem is also situated in the city, but was this poem came specifically out of a certain smell that one associated with childhood, particularly growing up in chawls. And I'm sure some of you would know what I'm talking about. The name of this poem is Hammam Soap. And of course, this is a morning in a chawl. Hammam Soap. The municipal tap burbles like a didgeridoo for a full half hour before showing the slightest signs of incontinence. Cued to rattling pipes, the building shakes itself awake. All rise as one, reach for buckets, taps are tapped, vigils formed. With each drip, hearts flutter. Righteousness is played out in a synesthesia of lather and foam, of head baths and bowel movements. In passages, toranas of towels align, fresh with familiar green exhalations, deep from within the armpit of Manilal Mansion. I'd like to, since Arundhati invoked Eunice, I'd like to read a poem I wrote for Eunice in her memory after she passed on. If I can just find it, yeah. I was very, very lucky that she released my first book in Bombay all those years ago and gave it an excellent review, which I'm told was not a very common thing. This poem is called Last Day in a Lived-In House. Street dog Scarper, ticked off in Konkani by twice-born parrots who learned profanity as catechism, picking at the brains of the mistress of the house. She calls back her strays like verses, but keeps the riffraff on a tight leash, calling them into account when words are scarce as now. And yet, there is always space for one more book on the poetry shelf. It's the saggy, baggy sagas that man spread the most. Remorse and regret are fools, not to be suffered gladly. A pickled wit is all, enough for the last day in a lived-in house. I think I shall just read one more poem. This is for a poet friend, Sampurna Chatterjee. The name of this poem is Janus Takes a Selfie. Janus takes a selfie. Behind you, chalk turns to cloud. Lime effloresces on wet walls, marking time for daubing pigment, fastening hue. Behind you, the doppelganger stares behind you, holding on to the power cord of possibility and restraint. Janus squats by your head, in your head. Behind you, the gossamer wire appears thick as ropes that harness clippers to the shore or stymie the archaeopteryx from the ionosphere. Behind you, in Plato's zoetrope, fires cast unbidden shadows, spinning reality like Muybridge sequences as you smile in my direction. Behind you, the taxidermist pride in orange and blue is nailed ungently on the head of the boy who awaits resolution. Behind you is perched a kingfisher, not an albatross. Take off, do the triple Lindy, dive into the shallow pool, choose your prey. Thank you.
A poem called The Refugee Pauses in Flight. It's for a writer who I greatly admire, and I see him really just once in 2 or 3 years, but each time there's a tremendous sense of inspiration and a rededication to this somewhat thankless activity. I'm thinking here of the Somali origin novelist Nuruddin Farah. So The Refugee Pauses in Flight for Nuruddin Farah. What should I call it? This number that has no name. Countries are working hypotheses that sometimes fail. I escape from mine, my wings of flame doused, my route sketched in rumors, an alphabet of stone and diesel tapping at my ribs. Invented reasons found in a drawer of mislaid knives. Never look back, not even at the veined marble columns, the coiling creepers, the rusty sea gate, the orange tree, all that you thought was you. Even the briefest glance over the shoulder could turn you to salt, on a photograph. Pick up the key ring, slowed by its bunch of yellowed date tags, where to draw the borders of the occupied city, across brain lobes that sleep while fingers twitch in spasms, across tents that shiver and capsize on a frozen beach, across graves on which the wild basil has grown, living among strangers, he almost forgot the names of his gods. This one's called The Map Seller. The Map Seller. The roof's dripping with pigeons, and I've just escaped the worst of the sun, strapped on my scuffed leather bag. And in a moment, this shade's delicious. And before the peddlers start shouting, "Say your piece, say your piece," I'll start calling out names and pulling countries from it. Big countries, small countries, countries broken in two, countries the size of handkerchiefs, and countries engorged with other countries, buffer zones jostled by failed states, island republics sinking by degrees, even nuclear powers that started as papaya plots or guano archipelagos. Whatever you like, I've got a map that looks like it. And you can have any piece of my flaking jigsaw atlas. If only I could reach you across this accordion sky that's billowed open to rain on all the hats I wear. Tribune of nowhere, Midnight's newscaster, out of work weatherman, all-terrain refugee, and across this trench that a JCB's dug along my street, tomorrow's avenue, today's wide sludge grave. Thank you. This one's called Highway Prayer. If you're writing a fresh anthem for the one scorched island marooned in cyclone country, be sure to put in a line about burnt tires and sleeping dogs, and another line on the flags, curtains, TV screens, more flags, all the shrouds the islanders are hanging up to protect themselves from the world. They need a savior. That'll be the man in the red raincoat falling through an open door. An unseen hand stops him, props him up. He blocks the door, a crucifix barring the passage of time. Time burns right through him. He clutches at his burst stomach, crouching on the sidewalk, holding fast to the creased memory of a river he once loved. In him the shimmer is great, greater than panic, greater than the fear of flies, of stakes, of exploding shells, of ending up as roadkill. Tongue-tied, he reads this Rosetta of violence, this highway across which sirens call to knotted prophets, batmen to jokers, jets to sharks. Bless me, ivories, the land pirate says, at last, shiver me timbers. In this place that found me empty, in this place that found me parched, I am blood, I am grief, I am the returning rocket, I am contrary to the Commonwealth. Lord of the booming antlers on a yellow signboard, let go, he calls out, let go. Craft me into this totality that never closes. Thank you. And one last one for this round. This one's called Night, Sky, and Counting. And it's dedicated to someone I met here in the first place, Teju Cole, the novelist and art historian. We've met over the years now many times since we first met here at GALF, and this comes from a conversation we had about an art installation that works with surveillance technology. So it's called Night, Sky and Counting for Teju Cole. Vivek, this is more of your magic because you put me on to moderate a discussion between Teju on the one hand and Heems on the other. So suddenly there I was talking about Dutch painting and rap. So, indeed. Night, sky, and counting. You are in the dark, looking up at constellations and shooting stars, finding traces of adobe roofs and walls at the eye's radium rim while grass tickles your back. You notice some celestial objects move faster than others, sorting red shift from blue note. You are the samurai of wide open spaces. They scan you. In their eyes, you're a ninja betrayed by body heat. You're that gray, glowing to orange smear. In minutes, you could evaporate, leaving heat shadow printed on the ground to mark the spot. You thought you were the subject, the locus of consciousness. When the shooting stars look down, they see an object with eyes, a moving threat. Under the black mirror at which you point, to finger link faint trails that might be a hunter, his belt, his faithful dogs, or a raven, a boar, a river of eyes. You have no cover. You are in the dark. Thank you.
And I've chosen a poem from my first book. This is a poem from a cycle of poems about St. Thomas in India, his time in India. And the name, since Keki is here, I might just read two, but this poem is called Anywhere But Hind. Hind. And this is a poem, like I said, about St. Thomas, who in India, especially in Kerala, is called Marthon. Anywhere but Hind. Did you take offense, my father, having you disrobed to satisfy my reason over faith? You did not recoil at the poke of my finger into the dripping smile puckering by your side, flashing bone? Were you then compelled to keep up the appearance of serenity? Did I blaspheme in my doubt, choosing to verify rather than trust? Send me, Lord, anywhere but Hind. Do not forsake Thom with the dubious honor of traversing the furthest, your one-man army wielding the saber of your light to the Malabar, to Kithai, moving eastward the boundaries of your kingdom of heaven. Could this maker of tables and coffins not spend his days tapping wood and shaping soul in the lands where the sweetness of Aramaic flows like a lactating breast, where the dates are black and sweet as the light you leave in your wake? You, my father, sold me to a dealer in spices. He smells of green pepper. I trail him to Kumili, away from Muziris, from Room. My tear ducts run. My nose bleeds from this infernal heat. And since I promised this to Keki, if you will bear with me, here is a poem and a translation of Faiz Ahmad Faiz. This is a poem called Rang Hai Dil Ka Mere. तुम न आए थे तो हर एक चीज वही थी कि जो है, आसमां हद्दे नज़र रह गुज़र शीशाए मैं शीशाए मैं। और अब शीशाए मैं रह गुज़र रंग फलक, रंग है दिल का मेरे खून जिगर होने तक। चंपाई रंग कभी राहते दीदार का रंग, सुरमई रंग है साते बेजार का रंग। जर्द पत्तों का खसोखार का रंग, सुर्ख फूलों का दहकते हुए गुलजार का रंग। जहर का रंग, लहू रंग, शबेतार का रंग। आसमां रह गुज़र शीशाए मैं, कोई भीगा हुआ दामन, कोई दुखती हुई रग, कोई हर लहजा बदलता हुआ आईना है। अब जो आए हो तो ठहरो कि कोई रंग, कोई रुत, कोई शय एक जगह पर ठहरे। फिर एक बार हर एक चीज़ वही हो कि जो है। आसमां हद्दे नज़र रह गुज़र शीशाए मैं शीशाए मैं। Red blossoms igniting the garden into inferno, venom stained of the blood it shed, the dead hue of night, the sky wet like a tear-stained vest, the road pulled like a throbbing vein, the glass disloyal like a mirror that changes reflections by the moment. Now that you are here, stay. Stay so colors, seasons, so everything comes to rest in one place. And once again, let all things be as they are. The sky stretched as far as the eye can see. The road stay a road. A glass of wine, a glass of wine. Thank you so much.
Read a poem called The Poet's Life. And some of these biographical details are even true, not of my life, but the life of Pablo Neruda, among others. The Poet's Life. He married birdsong. He sailed to the Black Island. He survived gunshots. He wore a sweatshirt under his linen jacket. He talked to parrots in Greek. He excavated lighthouses by night. He asked to be paid in paper money. He counted up the day's syllables before dinner. He wished the balloons hovering above the docks were Chinese lanterns. He called out to the spirits of drowned sailors. He walked down to the sea with the town's fishermen. He painted their gray nets in grainy gold on the beach. He picked up ridged violet shells and blew wet sand from them. He avoided striped red and white blinds on summer mornings. He avoided the roasted facades of brick buildings on summer afternoons. He noticed the oranges in the fruit stalls were shrinking. He remembered in detail the railroad town where he was born. He collected the rust and shadows that gather on aging metal surfaces. He licked his stamps himself, the envelopes addressed in green ink. He glued the spout back on the broken chocolate teapot. He opened the door to the deck and prayed the tree would burst with apples. Thank you for your time.
And since I couldn't think of one to conclude with, I'm actually going to pick one from a cycle of poems that Abhay and I discussed yesterday. It's a cycle of poems around Avvaiyar, the ancient woman of Tamil Nadu. She's a crone, she's a vagabond, she's a poet, and she's a woman who fascinates me increasingly as a woman who seems to have chosen old age voluntarily. So, why would she do that? As I said yesterday, for lovers flatten into photographs, photographs into reminiscence, reminiscence into quiet, and then what's left? perhaps just the oldest thing in the book, love without a story. And here's just a small section from this poem. Here's a trickster god who offers Avvaiyar a fruit and tries to trap her. So what's it going to be, Gran? A hot fruit or a lukewarm one? Asks the little boy on the tree, left cheek bulging with jamun and laughter. Pure cheek, really. Avvaiyar sighs, knows the tiresome games of the young, trick questions, riddles, puns, crosswords, wisecracks, bomo, limericks, anagrams, knows that little boys grow into men that scintillate, men that pontificate, men that dribble curses, men that cannot apologize, grey-faced men, men that turn love to ash, men with shiny weapons and kettle drum agitations, men with epic stories, epic vanities, epic bibliographies, epic, epic. Men that make young girls giggle and silently plot vengeance. Vedantin men, men with restless gazes, men that sip white wine and drip malarme. Avvaiyar sighs. The thing about age is being able to see through the game and still being able to smile at those that play it.